But we have the privilege to co-organize this session under the leadership of Dennis Pamlin from the Mission Innovation Rise. He will drive us to a agenda that is how the 1.5 agenda actually should be incorporating elements connected to the core human needs. And for today, we will be focusing on health and nutrition. It's a pleasure for the Global Innovation Hub with one of the founder partners to be at this session. And today we have a special guest. Of course, all members of the panel are well known because of this theme and these developments. But I'd like to welcome the Vice Ministry of the Ministry for Agriculture in Colombia. It's been also a very close friend and partner to the Global Innovation Hub. He's been today participating in a very important session. You know, this COP27 is about implementation, but it's also about moving the agriculture agenda forward, and it's about identifying the innovations that are needed to expedite in line with the recommendations from science. So I'd like to invite them, Vice Minister Luis Alberto Villegas, to deliver the opening remarks. Vice Minister, the floor is yours.
Okay, Carlos, thanks. Such an honor to be here with all the panelists. Hi, you, the ones that are away. For me, it's very important to be here today because after 27 years, the first time we have a day devoted to agriculture, food security, food agrosystems, and for me, it's the shortest term solution for climate change. Even if we are talking about timber and forestry and guadua that we have talked about with Carlos, after 7 years, you have results in climate change. But here, we think that if we focus in a way that we can integrate small farmers, smallholders in the value chain, not as providers only of raw materials, of commodities, but being real part of the value chain, sharing and vertical integration that help them share the benefit of the last end of the value chain. That's a way to not only achieve environmental goals, but also achieve social goals. Gustavo Petro, our president that took office 3 months ago, he decided to center all his policy in life. So now our program is called Colombia World Power of Life. We think that if we preserve life after a 50-year civil war, we are going to have the opportunity to achieve peace at the end. But the first point of the agenda in that human-centered goal is agriculture and food. We are sure that in a country like Colombia, in which we have 30 million hectares for agriculture and we are doing only 7 million hectares, we have a potential to grow and to feed the world. And if we give opportunity to people to work in a decent way in the countryside, produce food for their own people and the world, we're gonna make a great change. So that's what we are sharing here at the COP, that we are not only saying a commitment or signing a paper. Today, we signed a solution with CAF and GCF for $100 million to do 1 million hectares of sustainable agriculture in Colombia. So we are starting in January to change the way we do agriculture in Colombia and integrating small farmers in a new business models into the value chain. So thanks for inviting me, and I want to share the experience with you and also invite you to be part of this solution, because we can't do that by ourselves. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. And a big thanks to the Vice Minister. And I think this is a big and fantastic surprise for us, that this interest from Colombia to take a lead in this nutrition and really establish, as you say, the first COP. And it's a big honor for us sitting in this panel, really trying to establish for the future a more proactive and human-centered focus, because that's also what we in the Global Innovation Hub, Mission Innovation, has said, that we need to move away from a carbon lens and shift the focus on humans and make sure that we deliver things for them. And I know you have a very busy schedule, so I'd like to say thank you and good luck on your journey here.
Sorry, thank you very much.
No problem at all.
Let's keep in touch through Carlos.
Yeah. Thank you. So, thanks everyone, and that was fantastic for us, and I think it's a testament to the Global Innovation Hub also, how timely it is, that all of a sudden we were planning this, and all of a sudden as the word spread around, the Vice Minister in Colombia said this is really close to our agenda, we really like to support this and be part in telling our story. So it's really exciting to be part of this. So if you can start putting on the first slide deck, please. So, just like to do a short introduction for those of you out there who might be stuck in the traditional problem-based approach. Here, we are not inviting anyone because they have problems. These are only solution providers. These are the people building the future. We need to, of course, to focus on the problems, but we have spent way too little time on the opportunities. Next slide, please. And I think it's one easy way to formulate the need for moving forward is this expanded innovation agenda. We need to do both. What we talk about here is not instead of reducing emissions, it's on top of, in addition to. So instead of only looking at existing sectors, if you move around the COP or if you talk about climate, usually it's the big polluting sectors that are targeted. We want to start asking, where are the human needs? And instead of asking who are the sources of the problem, we want to ask who provides the solution. So that's where we are in this session. We're up in the right corner here saying, how do we provide human needs? And of course, there's no more obvious human needs than nutrition and health. It doesn't matter where you live, you feel hunger. Even the richest person has feel hunger. It's such a basic human need. We need nutrition and health. But who can provide that? And this is what this session is going to talk about, and we're going to hear from one of the really exciting new startups looking at new ways of providing proteins. We're going to listen to one of the really exciting investors thinking about how do you have impact as an investor. We're going to talk about the perspective from a city. How does that look like for us? Unfortunately, we had a last-minute cancellation also due to illness. We were supposed to have a person also here representing the grocery chains. That are a big part of the problem today, but Mattis is trying to move away and try to make them part of the solution. Next slide, please. So I really want to stress two images here. The first one is, where is the problem? If you look at it from an emission perspective, you look at the global north and where all the big emissions are. But if you look at it from an opportunity perspective or human needs perspective, you need to look at the 7, soon 8, 9, 10, and ultimately 11 billion people who are going to live on this planet. That should be our focus, how they can live better lives. And during the 90s, when we created Kyoto Protocol, it was about the rich part of the world reducing their emission by 5%. The instruments, the institutions, the tools we created during that time was for that. And the challenge we have now is that many of those, as we try to go from 5% in the rich world to a global perspective, they just turn up the knob. Instead of reducing 5%, reducing 100%. But that perspective is what, next slide please, locking us in also, because during the 90s and the last 90 years before that, we got better cars, we got better fridges, we got better everything. But all of a sudden, especially through the digital revolutions, totally new opportunities emerged. So I used to take the car as an example. We focus on better cars, but in the 21st century, that is just a very small part. we need to ask, why do we need to sit in that car? Maybe we can have a virtual meeting. Maybe medicine can be distributed through a drone. Maybe we can have the spare parts printed by a 3D printer. Maybe we can plan the cities so we walk instead of have to take the car to buy food and do other things. So there's so many new opportunities, and if we only look at the old system and try to reduce emissions from that, we lose so many things, and we lose cool entrepreneurs that we're going to hear about today who have totally new ways of providing protein. Next slide, please. And that's why we really said that we need to make a distinction between the core human needs, which is basically nutrition, health, shelter, protection, and personal development. The basic, as the Vice Minister said, is if we don't have food and shelter, we die physically. But if we don't have cultural, personal development, we die socially and as a society. So science, art, other things also needs to be there. Those have intrinsic values. That is what we are. But transportation, mobility doesn't have an inherent value. It gives us access to something. Same thing with energy. We don't need energy. We need what energy provides us with. So we need to make a distinction, because if we try to say we need more energy, we need to ask for what? Who's going to benefit from that? Who's going to have a better school? Because if we have mobility to oil platform, we provide solar panels for oil rigs. That is still part of the problem. So we need to ask, what is this giving us? Next slide, please. And that's where we look at food nutrition. That is also very exciting, because it's been a focus on the supply side very much. Just produce more. But if we look at what the challenges are, a little bit of a simplistic image, but you see the plant-based diet is probably the simplest way to really reach something. So never let's focus on the possibility for a plant-based diet. But also, next slide please, if you can. So plant-based diet is really the focus. Next slide. But we also need to look at best farm practices and high yields. But if we think about that in a narrow sense, we think about a farm. We will hear about this startup, Mycorena, who is having high yields and best farm practices from a very different perspective, where we don't need so much area on the planet to provide the protein. But also, we should not forget, next slide please, that we need to halve the food waste, and we need healthy calories. For those of you who attended yesterday on the resource panel, we eat more than 50% more than is needed in the global north. We don't have a problem with too little food, we have a problem with too much food. So we live in a very strange situation. That's why it's very interesting also that the new entrepreneurs that we need can't just talk about more food. They need to talk about healthy food also. Healthy calories, and how we can provide that in a way that is not wasting. So next slide, please. And that's really why we're here now. Next slide. So our idea is really to bring people together, because only having the solution providers, like we will have here now with Mycorena, or next slide, please, or only investors, or next, and unfortunately it's, so you have to take on two roles now, Pourya. The markets, where that's actually only sold, or ultimately, also next, the final slide here, those who actually bring those together. Because in cities, this is happening. The place where Mycorena will start producing, that is a place on the planet who's going to be a provider. And currently, that city do not get any benefits or credit for hosting Mycorena. So that's also something we like to discuss, and how can cities be part of the solution agenda and have a fight, so they want to be the one that hosts these new entrepreneurs. So with that said, I'd like to hand over to Ramkumar from Mycorena to give us a first introduction to a solution that, and I should, full disclosure, through Mission Innovation, we've done a first assessment and we'll do a deeper assessment. But the first assessment for us was enough to see a world leader. So over to you, and please give us an introduction to your amazing company.
My name is Ramkumar Nair. I'm from Sweden. We are part of the company called Mycorena, which already got an introduction. Thanks for a great introduction, by the way. What we do in the company, can I have the first slide, please?
The slides. The slides. Sorry? Oh, yeah, can you share the screen?
Yeah, I can do that. Can you see my screen now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. So the company Mycorena, our ambition is to be a world leader in fungi technology and create a sustainability revolution. So what we basically do at the company is creating nutritious food with fungi. And as you know, like there are already a lot of discussions going on regarding how food is being created, how is it transported, and as we are consuming a lot, which we already heard from before. So what we do basically is to create nutritious food, which we call promic. Promic is actually a next generation of protein. So we have plant, we have animals, and now we are coming up with a new protein source, which is we call it as mycoprotein. And it's a biomass that is based out of fermentation. It's highly healthy, nutritious, and it's a complete protein source. And at the same time, it has a super nutritious quality that can pretty much replace all the meat and plant-based diets. So what we are now doing right now is to use this as an ingredient to provide nutritious food, which is basically plant-based products. So right now we are working with companies that produce like plant-based products, basically nuggets, meatballs, and all sort of like daily routine food consumer products. And it has a very outstanding environmental benefit compared to like any other plant-based or animal-based nutritious product. And how we produce this promic is the beauty of the whole process. As we already heard, we produce it from fermentation process. And the beauty of fermentation is like you can produce it anywhere, irrespective of the land, the water resources, and anything that is kind of traditionally available for the plant or animal agriculture. So here, for example, like we produce it in the middle of the city center, basically in Gothenburg in Sweden, and we have like a huge production area that is kind of only 1/10 of like land that is required to produce the same amount of protein from an animal or a plant. So from a land perspective, this is a very super efficient process. And the same goes for like water usage. The fermentation process is super efficient that it doesn't require that much of amount of water that we otherwise have to produce the same amount of protein from a plant or an animal. And to look at the efficiency of the process, we used to say like we produce an amount of protein that is equivalent to a cow in one single day in our current production process. So this efficiency of the process is what is making it so unique that we can scale it much quickly, irrespective of land or water or even climate, and we can scale it up anywhere in the world. And we can create replicas of the same process, irrespective of where we actually stand. So this process is a unique developed process that we have created in the company, and it's a research that has been done for almost like 10 years now. And we are now scaling the whole process into like a much larger production process, creating a commercial process out of it. And coming back to like promic, so I already mentioned that it's a nutritious product, but at the same time, it's also like creating a sustainability impact. So if you look at like the amount of CO2 emissions that we produce per kilogram of our protein, it's way comparatively less than you'd go for traditional animal or plant-based diet. So in that retrospect, this is a very nutritious product that can be sustainably produced and scaled at the same time, creating the same impact that an animal or a plant-based protein diet can bring to the table. So what our ambition in Mycorena is to be a world leader in creating the sustainability approach with nutrition and quality product as being the stable background for it. And we believe the future of food is not in the future, it's actually now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fantastic. Ramkumar, for me, is one of those who we could see be the equivalent of what Elon Musk did in the transportation industry for the nutrition industry. And there's so many of these new passionate startups right now. And we pick Mycorena because it's one of those that we really think has an enormous potential. But there are many more of them. But people aren't aware of that. And most investors don't really care about that. They are still investing in the old, but not all of them. And I'd like to hand over to Leslie Kapin, who's the Director of Impact at Astanor Venture, who is a dedicated health nutrition investor and who's really one of the leading thinkers in this field, also in terms of how do you balance this need for return investment, but also keep the focus on actual impact in society. So over to you, Leslie.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. Really nice to be here. I mean, actually virtually here today, and great to be part of this panel that really gather different stakeholders that can lead this transition. So the main message for me today is really that there is a future, as Ram just said, there's a future of an agri-food system that can provide affordable, nutritious, delicious food for 11 billion people, while at the same time preserving the planet. So there are 3 points I'd like to make today. So I just want to first say why it is urgent to transition. Then I will go through the role that Astanor can play in this transition. And finally, I'd like to share a bit of the approach that we've developed to measure our impact in this transition. So before I dive into who we are and what we do to deliver on our theory of change, it's important to understand the problem to better understand the solutions. As you all know, and as has been already mentioned, the past 17 years, the agri-food industry has focused on 2 simple set of principles: efficiency and quantity. So at the time, the concern was really about food supply and security. And so the world designed a very efficient system for delivering cheap calories in quantity. So by investing in quantity and efficiency, what we really end up doing is a food system that overconsumed the planet. And at the same time, we've led to significant structural social inequalities at the same time. So as you all may be aware, the agri-food system is responsible for a third of the greenhouse gas emissions today. 70% of the water use, while interestingly, 70% of this water, 60% of it is actually wasted. And it's also one of the primary drivers of biodiversity loss. And something also that Dennis just mentioned, there's really, the agri-food system has led to what we tend to call the double burden of malnutrition. So actually it's 26% of the world population that experience hunger or lack sufficient or nutritious food. And on the other side, it's really like around 39% that is overweight or obese. So clearly the problem is not in terms of the quantity, but the way of delivering and the nutritious and deliciousness of this food. So what we've seen is that the global food system is at a breaking point. And now is the time to really move from what we just mentioned, like efficiency and quantity, to actually resilience and quality. And because we do believe that we can feed sustainably 11 billion people. And to do that, we need to go beyond the small improvements in the existing system, but we really need to transform a system change. So we should ask ourselves how to disrupt and transition the agri-food sector. And that is the reason why we launched Astanor 5 years ago. So we are an impact venture capital fund dedicated fully to the agri-food sector. So by impact investing, what it means is that there is no trade-off between impact and return. And we truly see that there is this opportunity to move the agri-food system from being extractive to actually being regenerative, which is really the specific things about the agri-food system. As an investor, we tend to say that we invest through the entire value chain, so from the soil to the gut. So we really start from companies that will accelerate the transition towards regenerative farming, like bio inputs or autonomous electrical tractors, from companies that are connecting and bringing sustainability through the value chain. Like for instance, like sustainable packaging based out of seaweed, or platform connecting farmers and consumers, to actually solutions that will support smallholders farmers, but also providing healthy nutrition to all consumers, like solutions like Mycorena, for instance. Today, as an investor, we've been investing in around 40-ish mission-driven companies in Europe and in the US. Now the question is, okay, we're an impact investors, but how do we measure our contribution? Because we truly believe that as an impact investors, we have the potential to be a catalyst for change. It is essential for us to demonstrate our impact creation, and so to measure as well the portfolio company's impact. In order to do that, I think I'll share also a little slide, because we have set up like a, I'll just share my screen, just bear with me.
Do you want to show the slide now? Yeah.
Actually,
There.
you got it here. Good. So as I said, we're an impact investor. We're an agri-food focused investor. So meaning that we invest in a sector that's extremely complex and extremely interdependent. We invest in a sector that can not only focus on greenhouse gas emissions. We're not an energy fund. For an energy fund, it's easy. You can just say, okay, this is the amount of greenhouse gas emissions I've avoided. For us, thinking about greenhouse gas only, it's not sufficient. We had to think about a much more holistic approach to impact, and that's the reason why we set up these 6 impact KPIs. So if you look at it, we have 3 planet KPIs. So one of them clearly is greenhouse gas emissions, because as I just mentioned, 1/3 of the greenhouse gas come from the sector, so it's extremely important to reduce and so to avoid emission in the sector. So we're looking at avoided greenhouse gas emissions, as we tend to call the scope 4. Then we also look at the water use, so the reduction of the water use that will allow our solutions to lead. And then we're also looking at biodiversity, how positive we can impact biodiversity thanks to our solutions. So these are the 3 planet KPI. Then in the middle, you have the social KPIs, because the people KPI. Because at the end of the day, the agri-food sector is not only about the planet, but it's a lot about the people. And when we talk about the people, we're not only talking about the farmers, which are clearly essential, but we're also talking about the consumers. And in fact, anyone which is on this value chain of the agri-food sector. And that's why we have 2 people KPI, social and health. And these are like the KPIs for the contributors. But there is another part of the ecosystem that's extremely important, is the enablers. We need enablers, we need data. And that's the reason why we have these 6 KPIs, which is the climate intelligence, which is around. And thanks to these enablers, they're actually providing the data that some of our companies will need to contribute to those planet and people KPI. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of, I don't know if I'm still sharing. Is that okay? Oh yeah, okay, that's good. And what's important to keep in mind is that, so all our portfolio companies have to contribute or enable one of these 6 KPIs. And what's important as well is that they should not harm any of the others. So the point is to say we will not invest in a solution that's going to avoid million tons of carbon emissions, but at the same time destroy the life of millions of farmers. So it's really something like the DNSH principle. It should not harm the other principles. What's the reason why I wanted to bring those metrics on this impact valuation approach is because I think it's essential as an impact investor, but it's also essential for portfolio companies like Mycorena, because at the end of the day, it's essential for all companies to communicate to their stakeholders their impact, because at the end of the day, if we want the system, if we want retailers, cities, and countries to adopt those solutions, we need to make sure that we can demonstrate the impact of these solutions. Maybe one last point to conclude, just to say, as an impact investor, we're not just doing these KPIs. We're supporting our portfolio companies to understand, to measure, to track these KPIs. So we support them through, for instance, life cycle assessment to make sure that they can really assess their impact. And what I find is amazing today is that we can see the stakeholders on these panels that are gathering here to support these solutions. And as you mentioned, Denise, earlier, this growing ecosystem of amazing mission-driven companies such as Mycorena that will need the support from investors, retailers, cities, and countries to be able to lead to this systemic change that will provide flourishing lives, as you said, for 11 billion people.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Leslie. I think that sort of holistic approach is really what we're looking for. And could I please have my first slide deck again and start with where I ended? Because I'd like to introduce Pourya and the amazing partnership we actually launched here beginning of this week. Next slide. Oh yeah, if you just click through next. There. Because we actually have, as Leslie was talking about, we need markets also. We need people to work with that. We need people to be proud of this. And I think this is amazing also because Ram and his Mycorena is a startup. But they will base the production on the first scale in Falkenberg. I think few people internationally outside Sweden have heard about Falcon Mountain, which is the translation of Falkenberg. It's 27,000 people. But it's also those kind of smaller cities, villages, and regions around the world that are boiling with passion and new ideas. And those are not invited. And that's a little bit of my dream here with Pourya, is that I hope we will get the Falkenberg together with Mycorena, together with investors also next year to really show here's the ecosystem, because by putting it in Falkenberg, that creates employment, that creates the need for skills, that creates the need for markets, as Leslie was talking about. How will the public officials eat? Will they start buying these kind of foods? Will they encourage people? Will they develop a curriculum for these things? So cities are really, and regions are really at the core of this, and not just the big multi-million cities around the world. Most of the world's people are not there. You know, sometimes we talk about cities, and usually the big cities, but the majority of the world's population are living in regions, on the rural area, or in smaller cities. But we tend to forget them because they don't have the budget, they are not so rich so they can attend all these things. But that's where I wanted to highlight this, that Mycorena, one of the coolest startups right now in the nutrition space, is going to start production in a city that most people might not have heard of. But they, as a solution provider, might be the equivalent of Baoding in China, who's exporter of wind power mills. Do we give them credit for that? Do we have strategies that help cities to become exporters and hosts of the next generation of solution providers? So with that, I'd like to hand over to one of the leading thinkers when it comes to cities and, well, everything else when it comes to disruption. Pourya, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Dennis, and good afternoon to all of you. Also, those colleagues and friends who are connecting virtually. And thanks a lot, Dennis, for this opportunity to share my thoughts on this. It is very exciting to have this conversation because although we know that food systems are crucial for our society, oftentimes we overlook the importance when it comes to decision making at the local level. And I believe that's very heartwarming to have this conversation in the context of Coop. So I would like to take this approach of like quickly highlighting food systems and agricultural systems, what they are providing for us, for our societies, regarding economic development and global economy, then coming to the challenges that they are posing to climate change and to health, and then coming down to their own vulnerabilities, linking them to 11 billion population, and then understand what are the potential pathways within cities. So let's get into numbers a little bit. We're talking about food systems and agricultural systems. Food and agricultural systems are providing 10% of GDP and 35% of jobs worldwide. And they are providing substance for our day-to-day life. So they are very important. On the other hand, they are contributing to GHG emissions globally. Based on IPCC report, it's estimated that between 21 to 37% of global GHG emissions are coming from food and agricultural system, but also the way we grow food. Also, because of the need for more food, the food systems and the way that we are growing food are becoming a more sort of wider and newer, and therefore they are creating opportunities for disease transmission. And that's why actually the UN has suggested as one of the key recommendations to phase out the unsustainable ways of agricultural practices to avoid future pandemics, right? And then why they are vulnerable. I guess the pandemic that we all experienced had a huge impact on food security globally, and also the inflation associated with that. And also the ongoing conflict in Ukraine added an extra layer of pressure on food security, but also the food price, which makes it less available for some communities. So the reality is food security, climate change, and poverty are heavily interlinked. And if we do not see this strategic connection, we cannot provide the solution needed to make the transition toward more sustainable future. And then 11 billion population lens is very interesting and helpful here, because the reality, as you mentioned, Dennis, is like, it's not about the growing population, rather it's about the ways in which we consume resources. And therefore, we need to take this very sort of thorough approach to the way we redesign our food systems to make sure that we can feed in a sustainable way 11 billion people, and at the same time making sure that we are not reinforcing future pandemics, and also being aware that like we are hopefully delivering food in a net zero way, right? So what it means in cities. Obviously, cities are like, we are living in an era that more than half of the population are living in cities, and they are the hotspot of consuming food. And at the same time, they are a hotspot of generating innovation and exporting globally. I would like to take this time and contextualize food systems innovation in the context of city, and understand like what would be the potential from me as a city expert perspective. So I would like to offer three general categories of solutions and pathways: solution clusters, restructuring, assessing and retooling, and finally experimentation. So what it means, let's come to solution clusters. So we all are aware that no single stakeholder has all the time and intellect and financial resources and capabilities and knowledge and tools to be able to make this complex transition that we need in food systems. So basically, solution clusters are a way of bringing committed stakeholders to the table to create the transition that is needed for a complex system such as food system. The common and conventional partnerships are designed only for narrow targets, and therefore we really need to think how best we can bring all those stakeholders in the context of a city to create solution clusters for food. Within cities, we need to bring, as the Vice Minister mentioned, we need to bring also like farmers, those who actually grow food, but also consumers and citizens and startups and incubators, all of them around the same table to create the solutions. But in an international scale, on the other hand, we need to design solution clusters with cities that are facing similar solutions in this context food systems, that they could also be exporters of solutions, something that is co-branded by startups and SMEs and local governments. The example that you said, that the city is not taking the credit from the startup, is doing such a great job, right? So there's one aspect that we really need to think about and explore the possibilities. The second one is about restructuring and assessing and also retooling. So oftentimes we talk about fourth industrial revolution and the opportunities, but we always need to take this into consideration, that digitalization is not a catch-all solution, right? If you want to take and go down that path, we may end up actually reinforcing the existing problems, particularly inequalities in our regions and cities, also in Global South, or perhaps more importantly in Global South, and in peri-urban areas and rural areas, right? But the reality is the existing systems, again, are not designed to respond to this increasing complex situations that we are and issues that we are facing today. But fortunately, what is happening is that digitalization can also hand us the opportunity to better design our solutions. Let's take the example of distributed ledger technology. Today, we have this opportunity that blockchain offers us to be able to trace the provenance of food from farms to the plates. And it can help citizens to become prosumers and adjust their behavioral change and their spending habits based on their understanding and based on their assessment that this data can provide for them. And also for subnational government, they can design and reinforce laws, particularly in animal welfare, right? These are just like examples. And then retooling is all about like embedding and integrating cutting-edge digital technology into existing systems that we all know that are not really revamped or upgraded to extent needed to help us to make the change that we need into that scale that we need today. So I believe this restructuring and assessment can reinforce the need for retooling. And last but not least is about experimentation and innovation. We should be aware that local governments have very limited resources and the pressure of election cycles and personal change, which basically limits the room for them to go down the experimentation and innovation. However, they are well positioned to enable other stakeholders, such as the startups and incubators, to enable and scale innovative solutions within a given jurisdiction, and ultimately provide solutions for other cities and local regions that they face similar challenges. And in this way, they can collectively help those cities and local economy to move up in the value chain. I would like to put a pause here and would love to hear from Dennis and other colleagues, and thanks so much for this time.
Thank you very much, Pourya. And this new role for cities is really exciting, and also the fact that we need to move beyond this incremental improvement in the existing system really put a challenge to all of us. But I'd like to come back to Ramkumar and sort of your view on Mycorena and because I think there's one really big problem: you're not growing fast enough. And you need to grow faster enough to meet the needs of society. So who can help you in the best possible way? How can we, 12 months from now, after you succeeded launching these things and started to grow, help you grow even faster? What is your wish list? That we can prepare people so they know who to line up when you will come and take center stage next year's COP here and tell the world leaders what is needed. Ramkumar, the floor is yours.
Yes, I mean, as we see it, any transition, any disruption needs scale. And for example, like in our case, like we are coming up with a new technology, process that could be creating like massive production, but that needs actually scalable model that could be produced in like tons and tons of products. So that is where we actually stand now. We have a huge challenge in scaling, and it goes back to the fact that there is not enough resources or money available for such kind of a process. I mean, like as we said, like for example, Astanor Ventures, I mean, they are not our investors, and they find it that we have like a very difficult scalable model. So these are the challenges that actually we see that many investors, they also see that it's very difficult to bet on our kind of companies, and that has to change. That mindset has to change because we are building resource, infrastructure. And building infrastructure takes time, and that is a transition that we are in. So most investors out there, they don't have that kind of a mindset, that they are very reluctant to invest in like back-end infrastructure, and that is actually a bottleneck. So if we find the right kind of investors who can actually see a 5 to 10 year perspective in our kind of processes, that will change the industry.
Thank you. I think that's really one of the key challenges, and I'd like to hand over to you, Leslie, on responding to that, because that's this sort of short-termness that is really triggering a lot, and especially in the investment community, that lots of digital scaling solutions without any deeper investments is very. But you are in a field where investments are needed to ensure, and when we need what is sometimes called patient investment, that takes a little bit of time to ensure them. But I think also one thing that I'm struck with is that lots of investors want simple solutions. They don't want companies move up the value chain. They want them to just be sub-suppliers to existing systems. So how can we help so that, the equivalent of Tesla would they just sell some batteries to the old companies? That would not have created the Tesla we see today if they would have sold the batteries. So how do you view that, how we really build these new networks of passionate solution providers that are not just providing incremental improvements to the current systems?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point, Ram. I mean, we have to be patient investors, and we are as a VC investors, but far less maybe than some really long-term, like 30 years investors. But at the same time, I think there's, as we said, there's a huge ecosystem of amazing startups that have those solutions, but they don't have a voice. As we've seen, all the frameworks, all the initiatives, everything is made for the current incumbents in the market. So what we need is to kind of consolidate this ecosystem to make sure that they can have a voice and they can be heard by the large agri-food market, heard by the cities, heard by the countries, and understand that they are the solutions to the problem. And today, I think the issue is also the accounting system that we have, which is really based on kind of a simple, unique materiality. We don't looking at the double materiality, we're looking at the financial return. What we need to look more and more is just not only the financial return, but the environmental, the people and planet returns as well. And I think we go into the right direction nowadays. I mean, as you have all heard, I mean, there's the ISSB that is doing a lot of work to include those metrics. It's still really early days, but at some point, I think the entire market will realize that we can not only thinking about return, but we need to think about what is the impact of this company on the people, on the planet. And when the market, when the cities, when countries understand that, then there will be a shift towards those amazing mission-driven companies that have already the solution but need to scale. And in order to scale for them, they need to get markets. So we need those large, Unilever, Nestle, to move towards the solution, because they need to reduce. Those companies need to reduce their carbon emission. They need to reduce their water use. They need to improve their impact on the people. So I think there's a move that is needed. It's slow and it has to accelerate for sure. And one thing that we've tried to do, for instance, as an investor, we collaborated with amazing startups as well as co-investor to build an organization called the GATA, the Global Agri-Food Tech Alliance. And the whole point of this organization is actually to gather those amazing startups that don't have a voice, but to make sure that they have a voice as part of this organization. So hopefully, thanks to the GATA, and which is still really early days, but hopefully we will be able to bring a voice to the solutions, this agri-food solution that can bring like a sustainable solution to the market.
Thank you very much. I think the first thing you really mentioned there in terms of visibility might be one of the most important things. And I usually stress that 30 years ago, we didn't have internet, we didn't have Tesla, we didn't have Uber, we didn't have Netflix, we didn't have Google, we didn't have Spotify. So many things that shape how we live, how we eat, how we move did not exist. But still, we focus so much on yesterday's companies only. And why we don't have Ramkumar and the equivalents. There's so many of these passionate people around who are not given the space, and I'm so frustrated. And I think this really links also to the fact that the partnership we have now, that we hope now, when we had the discussion with the Lord Mayor of Monterey, who said also, yeah, we should also bring our startup community, etc., more to the table. Why isn't that part of that agenda? And I would love to see that also. So your final thoughts on this sort of visibility and how you see next year maybe cities coming here with bringing the incubators, bringing the solution providers as really part of that agenda, because I don't think that really has been the case so far.
Thanks a lot, Dennis. I would like to, Kumar, thanks for your thoughts. And Leslie, I guess when she was talking about the need for market, it's very, inspiring to see that, there are investors focusing on the food as a very immediate needs of human beings. In the context of UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, those 4 major human needs that colleagues have defined. Obviously, food is food and shelter. Perhaps food is the most sort of urgent one, because it's very it's not something that you can waste your time on. But here's the reality: is I say like what Leslie and their teams is doing is exciting, and we need to value more. Is because oftentimes it's missing. And we come to the events, we talk about it, we go back home, and we forget, right? And then we know that there is a potential need for that. There's a need, and there's a potential to do something, and then we forget. And I was very inspired by the Vice Minister when he was talking about, he reached out to me before the session. It's like, I want my city to be part of ICLEI, okay? How we can do that. It's very inspiring, because if even our politicians with this busy schedule, if they really see the value of something, they would do that. They want to do that. They would be happy to do that. And that's why having such a conversations are really important. The example of Mayor of Monterrey that on a spot committed to be part of this, it's like, okay, now they understand the value of something that probably on their day-to-day work they don't have time to really listen to us and understand what is going what will happen if we work on that together. But the truth is, regardless of all these complexities, we need to do this all hand in hand, and we need to do this urgently. We do not have time. So back to that question, I think it's one of the things that oftentimes sort of impedes this type of collaboration is the lack of conversation and the language between these different stakeholders. We need to admit that we come to the table with different interests. And if you understand that, like investor has their own interest, and startups and SMEs, and then local governments, and we have different levels of local governments. Vice Ministers pointed out a very interesting keyword: vertical integration of governance from national to subnational to local level. If we have all of them around the same table, and if we have this conversation continuous, I'm very positive that many more solutions can be brought to the table, and many of these existing solutions can be scaled up in different parts of the world. We just need resources to actually do that, and we need resources to enable them, and we need the political leadership. Altogether will be a recipe for success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pourya. And I think that's what Pourya was ending with also is something that we tend to forget, that once we leave here, for many, that's the end of the climate discussion, except for those who are committed to the static problem agenda to a large extent. They keep on focus on how to reporting and reducing emissions. But the solution providers, they don't always have climate as the agenda. They have an export agenda, they have income agenda, their recruitment agendas. And I think if we bring those in from the cities and from the rest of community, we have a very different conversation. But the last thing, and I really want to end with that, is that for all of you out there, please look at Ramkumar and his colleagues, because there are people around the world committed to delivering these solutions. Who are the problem with them is that they not grow fast enough. The problem with them is not that they reduce their emissions. So we must bring them into this conversation. And if you go to Mission Innovation's Net Zero Compatibility page, you will see thousands of these companies who are solution providers ready to step up to the plate. It's really time to get them into this room, and we need to investors like Leslie, who's looking at how she invests in the tomorrows, not divesting for the big problems and finding zero carbon in her portfolio, but really try to measure the real impact. So by the end of the day, and really want to work all here together, and thank you very much for the panelists attending here and giving a face of the solution agenda for nutrition health. Thank you.
Thank you.